Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War, a news update, third part thereof, for the 8th of May 2024. I'm going to have to rush through this. I've got to go to my son's rugby end of season bash thing. So sorry if I speak quickly and don't give you as much verbose analysis as I normally do. So this is normally in the military aid and equipment segment, but it's just come out and I think it's interesting and important geopolitically. EU ambassadors have agreed on measures to use profits from frozen Russian assets in the EU, potentially providing Ukraine with up to $3 billion a year. However, Kyiv seeks confiscation of the full $210 billion. So Ukraine wants everything for themselves, obviously. The EU are probably a little bit guarded about the legal ramifications of that. It's much easier to get away with just siphoning off the profits to Ukraine, but they've agreed that now. That is sort of officially agreed in the EU Parliament today, I believe. Right, moving on. Zelensky and Ukraine and Spain are concluding talks on another bilateral security agreement. So that's really good. Hopefully that will be formalized imminently. Donald Tusk, the pro-European Polish leader, has said that Europe must spend, quote, big money, so, quote, no world power will dare raise a hand against it. This is absolutely on point. Nothing I disagree with there. Speaking at European Economic Congress in the Polish city of Katowice, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called on countries to increase defence spending and once again raised the idea of building a common European air defence system. I completely agree with all that. I think it's only wise. I mean, the problem for Europe is what to do with nations who join the EU and democratically backslide. So what do you do with Hungary? Hungary is a real problem at the moment. Slovakia is increasingly becoming one. A fugitive Polish spy, and I don't know all the details about this. Some people have sent me some messages concerning this and details, but I haven't really gone through it. But a fugitive Polish spy, a Russian military deserter, and a travelling dog are at the centre of a scandalous incident between Poland and Belarus. So a lot going on between Poland and Belarus, but the big one is concerning this judge who has done a runner to Belarus. Polish prosecutor's office opened a case of espionage against Judge Tomasz Schmidt, who fled to Belarus. He faces life imprisonment. I don't know what this is all about. I don't know if it's criticisms about Polish judiciary. I don't know where he sits politically. I just don't know enough yet, but he has fled to Belarus, and someone's telling me that this is causing a big stir in Poland at the moment. This is taking up an awful lot of bandwidth in the news information spaces in Poland. So that'll be something I'll give you some more detail on going forward. Bloomberg reports that the EU is planning restrictions on 11 vessels of Russia's shadow fleet. The EU has proposed restrictions on those ships as part of their I think, upcoming sanctions package to help Ukraine with sanction evasion that is so commonplace. Armenia has ceased to participate in the financing of the CSTO activities. They are the NATO equivalent in the Eurasian region, Russia's equivalent of NATO. Well, Armenia have now kind of pulled out of that. At least they're not funding any activities. So they have pretty much told Russia, I guess, where to stick it in that regard. Now we have got some things involving the UK and a number of different things, actually. So there has been the expulsion of a Russian defense attaché who the UK claims was an undeclared military intelligence officer. In one sense, this is not unusual. We know that every Russian diplomat in Europe is effectively involved in espionage. And this is one of the problems has been sacking Russian exiling or whatever. I don't know what the correct word is, but expelling Russian diplomats from different countries, and then they go to another country in Europe and peddle their wares. Well, actually, Europe has been pretty good on that, and Russia had a really hard time of their diplomatic corps really in Europe. Apart from, it seems that most of them end up going to Hungary or I guess Slovakia, which is obviously not cool. But here we have a defense attaché who has been kicked out the UK. An undeclared Russian military intelligence officer will be expelled from the UK, the Home Secretary has said. He also announced the closure of several Russian diplomatic premises. James Cleverly, whose role is the equivalent to an interior minister, told lawmakers in London, quote, today, in conjunction with the Foreign Secretary, I'm announcing a package of measures to make clear that Russia will not, make clear to Russia, that we will not tolerate such apparent escalations. PA Media reports that he continued, quote, I can tell the House that we will expel the Russian defense attaché, who is an undeclared military intelligence officer. We will remove diplomatic premises status from several Russian-owned properties in the UK, including a number of different places that they mentioned there. And we believe that that have been used for intelligence purposes. We are imposing new restrictions on Russian diplomatic visas, including capping the length of time Russian diplomats can spend in the UK. So he said that action followed a pattern of malign activity from Russia across Britain and Europe. Reuters reports that Russia's foreign ministry has said it will respond appropriately. And indeed, John Foreman here has said that since the Skripal affair, so this is Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, there was attempted assassination of him and his daughter. Some people did die as a result of that, but not them, with Novichok. Anyway, since then there's been one attaché in Moscow and London. This expulsion will almost certainly lead to expulsion of the UKDA, a total break in military relations between P5 members. Not great or unexpected, unclear what happens next or when. So there will be a response, in other words, from Russia there. Then we have, this is from the Mail Online here, mastermind behind world's most dangerous ransomware gang, Lockbit, that carried out damaging cyber attacks on the Royal Mail and Porton Down. Porton Down in UK is a defence military a military installation that deals with things like chemical warfare and research and whatnot. Anyway, that was cyber attacked as well as the Royal Mail had a big hit on it. Anyway, he's been unmasked as a Russian hacker, the mastermind behind the world's most dangerous ransomware gang, Lockbit, that carried out those damaging attacks has been found to be a Russian hacker. National Crime Agency has identified the Russian national behind the cybercrime group as Dmitry Yurievich Koroshev. The alleged leader's identity was revealed following the dramatic seizure of the criminal gang's infrastructure in February, and Koroshev now faces asset freezes and travel bans. He's been sanctioned by the UK, US and Australia as a result of the unmasking. Quote, these sanctions are hugely significant and show that there is no hiding place for cyber criminals like Dmitry Koroshev, who wreak havoc across the globe. Graham Bigger, Director General of Britain's National Crime Agency, said in a statement he was certain he would remain anonymous, but he was wrong. And this is great where nations come together and have solidarity. Like, I assume that actually UK, US and Australia is probably the Five Eyes, which would probably include, but I'm not sure, New Zealand and Canada in terms of sanctioning such an individual. But anyway, this is a growing issue, cyber warfare. And it's good to see that there is a bit of fight back there and some unmasking of nefarious individuals who are associated with Russia. The question is that guy associated with the Russian state? Almost certainly, but how do you prove that? Well, it may be completely unprovable in all practicality. But it should lead us to be in no doubt who the bad guys are with regard to these global threats. And the same can be said about China. There's also a lot of cyber activity taking place with China. In fact, there's a story's come out today. Have I got that in here? I might have that. No, I don't think I have. I think there's a really big Chinese-backed gang that's also been outed. Anyway, the soldier detained in Russia, so this is Gordon Black, may have been set up by his girlfriend, according to his mother, possibly. This is that honey trap situation I reported on this morning, whereby an American soldier has been arrested in Vladivostok, and unfortunately is going to be easily used as leverage there, which is really frustrating. But he was trying to, I guess, rekindle a relationship with a Russian woman that I think he'd been with in South Korea. But anyway, yeah, it's all gone south for him, or indeed north. So yeah, that's what his mother says. Now, 65% of Americans now understand that Putin plans to go much further than Ukraine, yet the US government continues to block provision of all weapons Ukraine could use to end it. Now, there's this idea, right, we're going to pop into a video to look at in a second. I talk a lot about particular MAGA Republicans that are pro-Putin, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, and others. And then you look at certain people at say, Trump rallies who parrot this information. And the thing is, they are disinformed by people like Tucker Carlson and people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. The question is, how prevalent are these people in the American electorate? And we often have this problem that the people that shout the loudest give a distortion as to how prevalent they are and how numerous they are, both politically in terms of politicians, but also the general public. And also we have this issue that people shout a lot on social media, but they're not always the people we think they are. So in these days of massive troll farms around the world, particularly in Russia, Marjorie Taylor Greene herself can be forgiven for thinking that she has many, many Americans who support what she's saying, when the reality is that most of those people that support what she's saying claim they're American, but are actually Russian trolls. And when it comes to voting at the polling booth in November, there may be this big lack of support, and we'll talk about this in a wee while, that shows that reality has been distorted completely. So the question is, well, what do American people think? And here we have Preston Stewart going through this. So we're going to actually pop in to see what Preston Stewart says. A number of you have told me to watch this video, and it is a really good video, and it's a good reminder that we shouldn't be carried on the, I guess, the torrents, the tidal wave of bile that comes from people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and think that is representative of the American public, for example, using the US as an example here, as a whole.
Russia in a positive light and or support what they are currently doing in Ukraine. That is who we're talking about. That Russian support, it just doesn't really exist in the United States. There's other aspects here, right? We've got the loud voices on the internet that make it seem like they represent a majority view in this way or the other, and they just don't, according to a lot of polling. There is also a group that just does not support continuing sending military aid to Ukraine for any number of reasons. They might think that we need to be spending more time and energy on issues at home, or maybe the southern border, or maybe that China is a bigger priority, whatever it is. There's a recent poll, Economist.
In other words, that you don't want to send aid to Ukraine doesn't mean that you love Russia, is the point he's making. And that's a good point.
YouGov on 23rd April, just last week, 29% of Americans said that they favored a decrease in military aid to Ukraine. I do not view those 29% as being pro-Russia. There might be a couple percent in there, as we'll see through later polls, that would fit that category. But I don't think it's fair to say...
I'd say it's more than a couple, but the point is definitely a good one. I'd say that you've roughly got maybe 9%, of people, which I still think is a massively worrying percentage, but nonetheless.
Just because somebody says, I don't think we should be providing more aid to Ukraine, that does not automatically make them pro-Russia, in my point of view. And that's kind of the direction that I'm going to take this video. So starting with a Gallup poll on 13 March 2023, the overall favorability of Russia sank to 9%. 9% favorability, or it was, actually. That was in 2023. It has since sunk to 8% as of February 2024. For reference,
and by the way, I've just thought about this because I've just watched this on 2 times speed earlier, but I just remembered that there is some statistics, and I went through an article that talked about this, to suggest that there are Americans who have a low favorability of Russia, but a high favorability of Putin. So actually, that is a caveat I would apply to that. And what that means, so they look at Putin and say, well, he's trying to embed these, for example, conservative Christian values in the US. I'm a conservative Christian in Russia. I'm a conservative Christian. Therefore, I like what he does, even though I understand that Russia sucks as a country and what they're doing in Ukraine might not be cool. But actually, I'm a bit... There is some complexity going on here. And there's a bit of a contradiction because I, on the one hand, don't like Russia, but I like Putin. And therefore, what Putin decides is therefore given a little bit more positivity. Like there's a little bit more of an intuitive, positive evaluation of what Putin decides to do with regard to Ukraine. So that can be seen in another way, but
It's
still 9% now 8% is low. And he goes on, and I won't show you that part, but he goes on later to say, and it's lower than many other countries in the world that we talk about on a consistent basis. So actually the US is doing all right in terms of seeing Russia negatively.
Other countries favorability: Afghanistan has a 13% favorability, China 20%. So 1 in 5
This is American favorability of those countries.
Americans has a favorable view of China. 1 in 10 has a favorable view of Russia. Cuba, 39% favorability. Love that. Iran, 13%. North Korea, 9%. Russia is worse off now in the eyes of Americans, has a lower favorability rating by Americans than North Korea. Syria is at 14% and Yemen's at 21%. All right, so the reason I want to bring these comparisons up is not that they're all perfect and dialed in exactly, but when was the last time you heard somebody talking about how wonderful North Korea is? Or how, hey, you know what, I think Iran's got all the right answers. Or that Kim Jong-un is really on the right track. If it wasn't for the United States, he sure would be, making good things happen. Probably not very much, right? But there's more.
The question is, why do the people that are anti-Ukraine have louder voices? What is it about that? Is it because the amplification comes from the Russian information campaign, that they are amplified in public places, and then that is picked up by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, and they run with it in a way that those narratives wouldn't be amplified in terms of Yemen or in terms of Afghanistan? No one there are no Afghan troll farms trying to get people to ramp up support for Afghanistan. And so therefore key players aren't picking up that idea and rolling with it. So yeah.
People that support those countries and think those countries are doing the right thing than do Russia. So just keep that in mind when you see some of the discourse online right now. More people have a favorable view of North Korea than they do Russia. So, reality check, maybe, especially if you spend much time on Twitter. Then we've got a Pew Research poll from 20 to 26 March 2024 that showed a 7% favorability rating for Russia, with only 3% of respondents saying that Russia is a partner of the United States, which is tough to see in a sense because we live together in this world and we have to work together in some way, shape, or form. So for 3% to view Russia as a partner, that's the state of affairs right now. That's how toxic this relationship has been between the United States and Russia. So we've got 7% favorability.
Which is absolutely right, but I still get blown away. But what do those three people think? Like, who are... And of course, there are people who will have family connections to Russia or have cultural connections or whatever. But yeah, goodness.
Of Russia. A comparison here is, I think it was a 2021 study, said that 10% of Americans believe the Earth is flat. And 12% think that the moon landings are faked. So just think about this again. When was the last time you were walking around town, hanging out with your friends, maybe going to a bar, and you had somebody sit down and have a genuine conversation about why the Earth is flat? How many flat earthers do you know that you've run into that have that conversation, that genuinely believe that? Supposedly that's 1 in 10. There are more flat earthers walking around in the United States than there are people who support Russia.
Interesting. So I don't think those are really good points. Again, the issue is how come some of those people that are in the minority get to have the megaphones they do? Yeah. And I wonder whether you'll end up getting to the elections in November and some of these people that think they have a much bigger platform than they really do become a little bit unstuck when they see that, oh, no, it turns out that most of my support I thought I had was actually just trolls on Twitter shouting for me and not actually anyone in the electorate in the US. And actually, there's a kind of parallel here just to talk about. I mean, this is the last thing I'll say about US and elections in this video. But another really interesting stat came out last night, which is another primary. So this is where Republicans get to select who they want to run as president in the November elections. So there's just been another primary, although it's kind of all sewn up anyway. This one is absolutely incredible. In Indiana, where 22% of the Republican voters selected Nikki Haley, who dropped out 2 months ago. If this doesn't tell you something, I mean, I keep saying that actually I think Joe Biden, like, unless something mental happens, and you could look at Israel, Gaza as being a bit of an issue, but really he should win this election. I think not easily. I think it will be close, but I think he should win it. I predict him to win it. And when you look at 20% of Republican voters saying, giving a protest vote to Trump when he has to win, okay, it's Indiana, but in some of these other states, he has to win every single one. So I think this is a fascinating campaign season that that we're already seeing. It's a fascinating run up to November, where an awful lot can happen, especially when Trump is involved in all of these different legal woes. But if the economy keeps performing really well, I mean, the American economy, and I know some dyed-in-the-wool Republicans out there just can't handle any positivity happening under Biden, but the American economy is seen as having smashed it out the park compared to many other economies around the world. It is outperforming the rest of the G7, G20, etc., and usually that an incumbent president would be a shoo-in on that. But of course, there's so much happening in the information spaces and all sorts happening all over the place. But yeah, anyway, I just think when it comes to Ukraine support in the US after November, it's data like this could have quite a big impact on how we see the election playing out, and therefore who is what's going to happen with Ukrainian support or support for Ukraine. Xi Jinping is now in Serbia, where he's seen the democracy, the token democracy. So he's gone to France. Now he's going to hang out in Serbia and Hungary. And of course, there are huge business investments in Serbia and Hungary from the Chinese. They have a lot of leverage with those two nations now. They're behind a rail network, isn't it, from Serbia to Hungary. So this is the direction of travel for those two nations, and I think it's worrying for European security and for European democracy going forward. It's not like I'm anti-Chinese, but China is an autocracy. Like, China has a really bad track record for human rights abuses. China, it does not have the freedoms that we have. We talk about banning TikTok, which is a Chinese company. China already bans it. TikTok is banned in China. Like, they are like full-on authoritarian, and we need to bear that in mind when we are evaluating what China is doing and who they are as a nation. Right, and the last thing I'm going to say, I'm not going to have a big thing on climate science or anything, but just a general point about the Ukraine war and about all the crazy stuff happening. So we've got Israel, Gaza, we've got the Ukraine war, we've got Trump's legal woes, we've got spying claims going around Europe, we've got interference in elections, we've got more elections around the world than in any other year in history this year. There's so much stuff going on. There's China, Taiwan, there's the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa. There are all the coups that are taking place across the Sahel region, with Russia getting involved in influence campaigns there. And our eyes are off the ball. The world's top climate scientists expect global heating to blast past 1.5 degree Celsius target. We were thinking about stuff like this, but our eyes are off the ball. And for good reason. There's all sorts of crazy stuff going on around the world. I do worry that, and I'm obsessed with Ukraine, right? That's all I think about. Someone was telling me that, Pompey had been promoted, right? We won at Portsmouth. I support Portsmouth Football Club, right? And I live near Portsmouth. And they won, and then you went out on the town. It was a big celebration. That normally happens when you have open top bus celebrations, blah, blah, blah. But then the guy was telling me today, oh yeah, and I can't believe that they went and did that around the town. I mean, goodness me, everyone's going mental about that. I was like, what's going on? I know nothing about. I just don't watch local news at all anymore. And it turns out that the Pompey team went and the players themselves smashed up pubs and whatnot around Portsmouth in a drunken celebration. It was all highly controversial. How do I not know that? Because my head is in Ukraine the whole time. But as a result, things like climate change, which is an existential threat to the world, is taking a back seat. So many other important things that we need to concentrate on are taking a back seat. We are spinning plates, and there are only so many plates we can spin. And the problem with wars like this is that they take our eye off the ball for so many other things, not intentionally. It's just the nature of our inability to take on too many subjects, too much data. We can only cope with so much stuff in our heads, and it does make me worry. I mean, I'm still going to be concentrating on the Ukraine war predominantly, but I do get worried that there's so much else that is going by the wayside. And it's a crying shame. Anyway, let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.